Okay, one of our discussions this last module was contrasting atonal music with modal music. This is really kind of an interesting thing because those two types of music really have nothing to do with one another, only they are both systems of music writing. And I think when asked, had you ever heard uh, atonal music before, a lot of you answered that you had, in fact, heard what you thought was atonal music in horror movies and scary movies and stuff like that. And that's not a bad answer, actually, and that is one of the places where atonalism is used quite a bit. I wanted to see if I could distinguish these two different ways of writing music. We've already talked about modal music, so you know what that is. You know how it started. But when music progressed and progressed, say up until past the 1900s, um, along came a composer named Schoenberg, who was a Viennese composer, and he composed a lot of music, but he started feeling like everything that is possible to do in music has already been done. And I think he particularly was enthralled with Wagner, who wrote so much great music. Um, and Schoenberg simply decided he was going to invent another way of making music. And in order to do this, he had to make it completely different than anything that's ever been heard before. Otherwise, it's just going to become a subset of what we already know. So he invented a thing called the 12-tone row. And the way you work this 12-tone row is that you take all 12 tones, all 12 half steps, and you arrange them in the least consonant fashion. In other words, anything that could be construed as a very harmonious interval, like going from C to E major, C to E natural. That's a major third. I mean, it's very consonant. It's what makes up a major triad in C. So that you wouldn't tend to write that. It would be much better to go from C to maybe either E flat or maybe F sharp. You reach for intervals that have no consonants or very little. Once you've removed all the consonants to the best of your ability out of your 12-tone row, and also they don't need to go in any sort of order in terms of making them easy to sing. That's out. That was, again, part of the old system of making music. In this new 12-tone system, you can jump around and go wherever you want. You just don't want to get near anything that sounds consonant. So you wind up writing 12 notes that sound very disjointed and there's no harmonious feel to them. Now you take that same row and you take the intervals and flip them upside down. And that would be your harmony. Then you take that same 12-tone row and you turn it around backwards and you superimpose that as part of your harmony. So what you are doing is writing music, but not using any of the foundational elements that we normally draw on when we go to write music. We're not trying to write anything pretty. We're not trying to write, all we're trying to do is write something different. And in order to appreciate this kind of music, you have to listen to it with new ears. And to most of us, atonal music is very dark and foreboding, very weird and eerie. It doesn't have any of the properties that most of the music we listen to has. And because it turns out that way, it has found its rightful place in horror movies and television and film, where we want something gnarly sounding and dark and foreboding and scary. So we tend to use 12-tone writing in those places. But in the beginning, Schoenberg was really trying to reinvent the wheel. He was trying to come up with an entirely new musical system, and he had his disciples that tried to follow in his footsteps. Alban Berg and Webern, those guys were his students, and they tried to write that type of music. And 12-tone music got to be quite a big thing. You know, it's postmodern, and it's something that you should really look up some of these composers and listen to their music. Some of it's vocal, and some of it's not, and it's very different from anything you've heard. You really need to listen to atonal music. We have Arnold Schoenberg to thank for that. And yes, in movies and television, and particularly horror films, we hear a lot of atonality. Even though a lot of that writing does not stick religiously to Schoenberg's system of writing 12-tone, it has that vibe. And so when we are hearing horror music, we are thinking of Schoenberg and atonality. But that's where it started.